Labor Day is celebrated on May 1st of every year in most countries around the world, including India. This day is dedicated to the workers and laborers who have contributed significantly to the development of their respective countries. The history of Labor Day dates back to the late 19th century when the labor movement started gaining momentum in the United States. The labor movement in the United States aimed to address the poor working conditions, low wages, and long working hours that laborers were subjected to during the Industrial Revolution. The labor unions in the United States started organizing strikes and protests to demand better working conditions and wages. In 1886, a massive strike took place in Chicago, which led to a violent confrontation between the police and the laborers. The violence resulted in the death of several laborers, which later became known as the Haymarket Affair. Following the Haymarket Affair, the labor movement gained momentum, and the demand for better working conditions and wages increased. In 1889, the Second International, an organization of socialist and labor parties, declared May 1st as the International Workers' Day. This day was chosen to commemorate the Haymarket Affair and to honor the laborers who had lost their lives in the struggle for better working conditions. In India, Labor Day is also known as May Day and is celebrated to honor the contribution of workers and laborers to the country's economy. The day is a public holiday in India, and various events and programs are organized to commemorate the occasion. Labor unions and organizations organize rallies, marches, and seminars to discuss the challenges faced by workers and laborers and to demand better working conditions and wages. The Indian Constitution provides for the protection of the rights of workers and laborers. Article 23 of the Constitution prohibits forced labor, and Article 24 prohibits the employment of children below the age of 14 years in factories, mines, or other hazardous occupations. The Constitution also provides for the right to form unions and associations and to go on strike. Despite these provisions, workers and laborers in India still face several challenges. Many workers are employed in the informal sector, where they are not protected by labor laws and do not receive any social security benefits. The workers in the informal sector include domestic workers, street vendors, and construction workers, among others. The informal sector workers are vulnerable to exploitation, and their working conditions are often poor. They work long hours, receive low wages, and are not provided with any social security benefits, such as health insurance or pension. The lack of social security benefits makes them vulnerable to poverty and destitution in old age. The formal sector workers also face several challenges, such as low wages, long working hours, and poor working conditions. The workers in the formal sector include those employed in factories, mines, and other industries. The working conditions in these industries are often hazardous, and the workers are exposed to several health and safety risks. The workers in the formal sector are protected by labor laws, such as the Factories Act, the Mines Act, and the Industrial Disputes Act. These laws provide for minimum wages, working hours, and safety standards. However, the implementation of these laws is often poor, and many employers violate them with impunity. To address these challenges, the government has taken several measures to protect the rights of workers and laborers. The government has implemented several social security schemes, such as the National Health Protection Scheme and the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Man Dhan Yojana. To provide health insurance and pension benefits to workers in the informal sector. The government has also implemented several measures to improve the working conditions and safety standards in the formal sector. In conclusion, Labor Day is a day to honor the contribution of workers and laborers to the country's economy. The day reminds. Today, Labor Day is observed in various ways in different countries, but the common thread is the celebration of workers and their rights. In this article, we will explore how different countries celebrate Labor Day and what it means to their citizens. United States. In the United States, Labor Day is celebrated on the first Monday in September. The day is often marked by parades, picnics, and other outdoor activities. It is a federal holiday, meaning that many businesses and government offices are closed. The history of Labor Day in the United States is closely tied to the labor movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. One of the most significant events in the movement was the Haymarket Riot of 1886, in which workers in Chicago were protesting for an 8-hour workday. The protest turned violent, and several workers were killed. The event helped to galvanize the labor movement, and in 1894, President Grover Cleveland signed into law a bill making Labor Day a national holiday. Canada. In Canada, Labor Day is also celebrated on the first Monday in September. The day is a public holiday, and many businesses and government offices are closed. The first Labor Day parade in Canada took place in Toronto in 1872. The parade was organized by the Toronto Trades Assembly, and it was designed to draw attention to the need for workers' rights and better working conditions. Today, Labor Day parades are still a common way to celebrate the day in Canada. United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, Labor Day is not officially recognized as a public holiday. However, there is a similar holiday called May Day, which is celebrated on the first Monday in May. May Day has its roots in ancient pagan festivals celebrating the arrival of spring, but in the UK, it has also been associated with the labour movement. May Day is often celebrated with Morris dancing, a traditional form of folk dance, and maypole dancing, in which people dance around a tall pole adorned with ribbons. There are also often protests and rallies organized by labor unions and other workers' organizations. Australia. In Australia, Labor Day is celebrated on different dates depending on the state or territory. In some states, it is celebrated on the first Monday in October, while in others, it is celebrated on the first Monday in March or May. The origins of Labor Day in Australia can be traced back to the 1850s, when workers in Sydney organised a march to demand better working conditions. The tradition continued to grow, and by the early 20th century, Labor Day had become an important holiday in many parts of Australia. Today, Labor Day is often celebrated with parades, picnics, and other outdoor activities. In some parts of the country, it is also a time to reflect on the history of the labour movement and the struggles that workers have faced in Australia. China. In China, Labor Day is a national holiday, and it is celebrated on May 1st.